Ach, up, ach, up, ach. Oh, wang, 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 wang. Good morning. My name is Chris Fox, and I am done with a novel. And when I say done with a novel, I don't mean just any novel. I have written 185,000 words of epic fantasy, and finally have completed a draft that I'm happy with. So that's a pretty major milestone. Puts me at like 230,000 words for the year, written and edited. Which is going really well. So I am going to take next week off, a celebration, and we are going to go through that video and edit every word of it. So you're going to see between Monday and probably Wednesday, but I'll give myself as long as Friday, we're going to pour ourselves into an edit of the novel. I'm going to show you all the things that I'm fixing, and this includes primarily things like language and description. So I'm going to go in there, and anything that doesn't belong in a fantasy novel is going to get processed out, where it's going to say, that's not really the vernacular they would use. We're going to go ahead and update that and make sure that it fits my fantasy world. And I'll show some of the rules that I'm using for that. I have some very specific linguistic rules in my world, so you'll hear a distinctive sound where my sentences are a little different than you might find elsewhere, and I'll explain why that is and what the pattern is. So you may not know it, like if you hear it, it'll sound fantasy-esque, but us writers, if you're looking at exactly what's being removed, you'll see, oh, he's removing the second pronoun in every single sentence. Anyway, in the second half of this video, we're just going to go through a quick view of the final file. I'm going to put the Scrivener file up where you guys can see it. It probably won't be live at the time of viewing this video. By the time we're getting into the editing video, though, it will be. So as we're going through editing and doing kind of large-scale editing, you can see the raw, finished version of the file. So all I did is I saved off a copy of it as soon as I was done writing it. And then what I'll do is I'll edit the heck out of the real version that I'm working in, but then I've preserved at least that original one. So yeah, we'll go ahead and jump into that. Again, I just want to go through the file a little bit, show you what it looks like finished now. I mean, we talked about this if you've been following videos on the channel for any length of time. If you go back to that first So You Want to Write Epic Fantasy video, I want to say that was in early January, so here we are a little under 2 months later, and I have a doorstopper, like a 800 page book, like done and fairly well edited. So it is going to need some work, but interestingly, I only removed a single chapter as I was going through, and oftentimes it'll be like 10 or 12, like there'll be a lot of stuff that gets ripped out, but in this case there was only one. There was only one chapter that I found so far that needed to be added, and then there's maybe a half a dozen chapters that need rewrites. Anyway, let's jump in and I'll show you what I got. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment of truth, and I feel enormous pride here. I cannot even express the amount of pride that I feel. I have wanted to write this book with something approaching skill for I don't even know how long. I'm going to guess age 6 was the first time I said, you know what, I really want to write a book. I want to tell these stories on my own when I first discovered Choose Your Own Adventure books. And of course I wanted to write about dragons and magic and mages and swords and, all the usual tropes, and that's evolved over time. Well, finally I'm getting to do this. And I'm going to scroll slowly through the chapters here, and you can see just how much of this I've generated. I can't claim that it's good, but man, there is a lot of it. You can see I continue with my model all the way through, so I've got an interlude chapter basically every 4 to 5 chapters. And that deviates from the main narrative, so anything with a chapter number is, again, from Zol's perspective if you watch previous videos. And the interludes are from other people's perspectives. And as you are going through, many of them give away sort of the names of the people that you're learning from. So, we finally hear from people like Tissa, if you've read any of the beta stuff or watched any of their previous videos. Yeah, but this week I powered through a lot of the fun stuff, the end of the book. And I'm not necessarily going to get into spoilers for this to show you too much of what happens here. We're not going to go into the text for these chapters. But you can see I ended up with 64 regular chapters. And then, let's see, I want to say 12, 13, 14 interlude chapters. I can do basic math. 79 chapters, and they were all, roughly 2,000 words. So the final word count on this, again, 181,000 or 82,000. I'm not sure. I'm not going to look. But I learned so much in the writing of this. And what I did, which I think was a really brilliant move, is I went through Interlude 7, Eric. This is the last chapter of the sample that I sent out. So basically I put up a book funnel link with a file that is up through this point. It's raw and unedited, but I gave them a lot to work with. It's like 70 or 80,000 words. And I said, hey guys, can you help me take a look at this? And I got back a bunch of beta feedback, and most of the people that gave me the beta feedback assumed that this was the entire novel and this chapter was the ending, because it's a pretty good cliffhanger. And it would make an excellent ending. Like if I was trying to maximize this series financially, what I'd probably do is end it here, and then make shorter books. But I like, long epic fantasy books. I feel like you're making an agreement with the reader with such a tome. Hey, listen, you're going to be in this world for a while, and I don't want to break that. Anyway, those people were in for a treat. In a couple of days, I'm going to send them the entire book, and they can read the rest of it. But why I bring it up is they have been sending me emails, and these began on the first day. So I sent them like 75,000 words to read, and on the first day, people were emailing me saying, I'm done, here's what I think. And some patterns emerged immediately. So the first problem that I ran into was the Crown of Command, which is an awesome prologue story, takes place 400 years before the present and has no direct tie to this book. So cutting it changes nothing. The reader loses nothing. And the reason why I'm cutting it is twofold. First, one of the beta readers pointed out that I am dealing with something in my world called the Ashlands, which I'm very proud of and were first conceived of in the 90s. This goes way, way back in my world. And the basic concept is that the stewards, who are stand-ins for gods, they were appointed by the gods when the gods left, and are very powerful, they enact a magical ritual that rains ash down on the heartland of this empire, and buries it and entombs it in ash. And everyone that dies within this field of ash rises and is cursed to serve as a guardian. So basically what I was setting up was an adventuring setting where my players in the games that I ran could use ash runners and head in and basically raid tombs and fight undead. I made this cool land. Well, Brandon Sanderson has kind of cornered the market on ash, and if you use ash in a fantasy novel, especially early in a fantasy novel, like your prologue, people are going to say, oh, I've read this before, Brandon Sanderson wrote about ash, next. And I got that from one of the beta readers, and that was their response. So I'm like, you know what? How much do I really need this prologue here? Is it here because it serves the story? Or is it here because I feel like it's awesome and it's one of my darlings, and because Robert Jordan had a prologue, I should have a prologue too? And I realized that that's the case. I don't actually need to have a prologue. I really shouldn't have a prologue. If I'm going to have a prologue, it needs to strongly impact the main plot. So probably what I'll do is take Behemoth, which is Interlude 2 currently, move it to the beginning here, and this will become my prologue. And for those of you that have read the sample, this introduces one of the main characters, Lee, who we see throughout the book. So giving her chapter early won't really derail the reader, and it's a phenomenal 3,500 words. It really introduces you to my world. You see something you don't expect and probably haven't seen in most fantasy novels. So it might be good to put it there, right? And I could still change it and move it, but the reasoning is this. When I start the novel, when a reader jumps in, you want to let them get comfortable in the head of your protagonist. And the more often you have them jumping around, like if you have a different point of view every chapter, the more likely you're going to shake them loose. But if you give them 10 chapters that's the same person, then they're much less likely to have any problems. And so that's why I've tried to space the interludes out as I do, so you get a solid 8,000 to 10,000 word chunk of being in Zol's head before it's interrupted briefly with something else. But the things that interrupt it do need to be very relevant to the story, and I've chosen each of them very, very carefully. So anyway, if we move that to being the prologue, this is kind of what the final would look like. And I didn't change a lot else. That was the only chapter that got cut. The prologue doesn't really fit. I'm super proud of it, but I killed that darling. What I will do is give it away to readers. So, you'll see my standard in the beginning of the book, hey, sign up to my mailing list, and you're going to get Sagir's background, who I predict will be far and away the most popular character in the book, hands down. I mean, he's a tiny rat mage, that stands on the main character's shoulder and is an almost literal sidekick. People are going to love Sagir, and so I will give them the reader magnet. Here's Sagir's background and how he became enslaved. And then I will also give them the prologue that I'm cutting here, the Crown of Command, because I think it's an excellent story and I think they'll enjoy it. And it does frame a lot of what's happening, because eventually, of course, Zol is going to go into my Ashlands and seek that Crown of Command. So it's relevant to the series, just not to this book. And I do kind of reserve the right to maybe put it as the prologue to another book, like maybe in book 3 or book 4, whenever he is actually relevant to that segment of the plot, it would make sense. But for now, it's gone. So the chapters that I added both had to do with the same character, Tissa. Early on in the book, the main character has a best friend, Tissa, and they get separated. And because of Zal's actions, she is trapped in a kind of demonic warren where she has to make a deal that doesn't cost her soul, but it does come with a very permanent price, and she blames Zal for this. And I forgot where I was going with that. Oh, yeah, so we needed to see what her mindset was for this, and so I wrote Interlude 1, which is not currently in the beta, so people that have read the beta haven't seen this chapter, but basically now we're seeing what happened to Tissa while she was down there, and then later in the book I added a couple more chapters from her perspective. And then if you wonder why I'm doing that from a plotting perspective, everything is coming full circle at the end here. So as an example, Tissa has an interlude, and you see that she plays a pivotal role at the end. You know, here she is, we've got this big interlude, and I'm not going to tell you how she influences the end of the book, but she has a role to play. And so it's been not clear to the reader why she's in the book until this point, and they're like, oh, now it makes sense. And I did a lot of that in the changed portion of my story circle. And again, there are videos on the channel if you want to check out the story circle. But the changed portion of the story circle is you show your character can face similar circumstances that they did in the beginning, but now they're much more powerful and possessed and able to deal with those circumstances. And so I'm dealing with a lot of those. And one of the small things, in chapter 64, Debts Paid, there's an old woman early in the book that you see in the dims. And she makes Zal promise to come back and tell her a story. Well, here I have at the end of the book, he's coming back in to tell that story because you want to give closure to the reader, and that's a nice callback to the beginning of the book, you know, setups and payoffs. Anyway, I mostly just wanted to crow about the fact that I finished this book. I am so insanely pleased that I was able to barrel through it. It's just crazy, the amount of words that I have cranked out this year. So let's get that up. Okay, so as you can see, this is my words for the year. I'll jump it up a little bit so you can see more of it. I'm at 231,471 for the year. So 231,000 words written and edited. Just cranking them out, mostly 5,000 and 6,000 word days. There were a few that were not at that level. I had one that was 2,200 where I was just exhausted. And you can probably see in my face, I'm just really fried. Like I just feel, you know, spent. I'm putting so much effort into this, and it's rough, it really is, but you can see the outcome here. You know, 100,000 word months written and edited are going to serve me really well when I get this book out to market. I think it will be tremendously profitable. I think that if I clear the decks and I focus on the series, and so I just do book 2, book 3, book 4, and so over the course of like a year or two, I put out like 2 million words of awesome, you know, progression, epic fantasy fiction, I think, you know, it'll do well for me. And it'll be a heck of a lot of fun to do, so that's sort of the goal. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough. I wanted to update you guys since I am a little bit late on a video for the week. That's where I'm at. I do need to get back to the writing, and I will see you next week.